Hey church, thanks for tuning in to another episode of our podcast. Today's a little bit different than any of the other podcasts that we've done. Today's just going to be a story that we're going to go over. It's very encouraging, and I hope that you all take something away from it. There once was a great and noble king whose land was terrorized by a crafty dragon. Like a massive bird of prey, the scaly beast delighted in ravaging villages with his fiery breath. Helpless victims ran from their burning homes only to be snatched into the dragon's jaws or talons. Those devoured instantly were considered more fortunate than those carried back to the dragon's lair to be devoured at his leisure. The king led his sons and knights in many valiant battles against the serpent. Riding alone in the forest one day, the king's son heard his name begin to be purred soft and low in the shadows of the ferns and the trees. Curled amongst the boulders lay the dragon. The creature's heavy-lidded eyes fastened on the prince, and the reptilian mouth stretched into a friendly, seductive smile. "Don't be alarmed," said the dragon, as gray wisps of smoke rose lazily from his nostrils. "I am not what your father thinks of." "What are you then?" asked the prince, nervously drawing his sword as he pulled in the reins to keep his fearful horse from bolting. "I am pleasure," said the dragon. "Ride on my back and you'll experience more than you have ever imagined. Come now, I have no harmful intentions. I seek a friend, someone to share flights with me. Have you never dreamed of flying, never longed to soar in the clouds?" Visions of soaring high above the forested hills drew the prince hesitantly from his horse. The dragon unfurled one great webbed wing to serve as a ramp to his rigid back. Between the spiny projections, the prince found a secure seat. Then the creature snapped its great wings twice and launched them both into the sky. The prince's apprehension quickly melted into awe and exhilaration. From then on, he met the dragon often, but secretly. For how could he tell his father, or his brothers, or the knights that he had befriended the kingdom's greatest enemy? The prince felt separate from them all. Their concerns were no longer his concerns. Even when he wasn't with the dragon, he spent less time with those he loved and more time alone. Over time, the skin on the prince's legs became calloused from gripping the dragon's rigid back. His hands grew rough and hardened, and he began to wear gloves to hide the disfiguration. After many nights of riding, he soon discovered scales growing on the backs of his hands as well. With dread, he realized his fate were he to continue, and so he resolved to return to the dragon no more. But after a short time, he again sought out the dragon, having been tortured with desire. And so it transpired many times over. No matter what his determination, the prince eventually found himself pulled back in, as if by the cords of an invisible web. Silently, patiently, the dragon always waited. One cold, moonless night, their excursion became a foray against a sleeping village. Torching the thatched roofs with fiery blasts from his nostrils, the dragon roared with delight when the terrified victims fled from their burning homes. Swooping in, the serpent belched again, and flames engulfed a cluster of screaming villagers. The prince closed his eyes tightly in an attempt to shut out the carnage. But in the pre-dawn hours, as the prince crept back from his dragon trysts, he discovered the road outside his father's castle unusually busy. Terrified refugees streamed into the protective walls of the castle. The prince attempted to slip through the crowd to close himself in his chambers, but some of the survivors stared and they pointed towards him. "He was there," one woman cried out. "I saw him on the back of the dragon." Others nodded their heads in angry agreement. Horrified, the prince saw that his father, the king, was in the courtyard holding a bleeding child in his arms. The king's face mirrored the agony of his people. As his eyes met the prince's, the son fled, hoping to escape into the night, but the guards apprehended him as if he were a common thief. They brought him to the great hall where his father sat solemnly on his throne. People on every side railed against the prince. "Banish him," he heard one of his own brothers angrily cry out. "Burn him alive," other voices shouted. As the king arose from his throne, bloodstains from the wounded shone darkly on his royal robes. The crowd fell silent in expectation of the king's decree. The prince, who could not even bear to look in his father's face, stared down at the stones of the floor. "Take off your gloves and tunic," the king commanded. The prince obeyed slowly, dreading to have his metamorphosis uncovered before the kingdom. Was his shame not already great enough? He had hoped for a quick death without further humiliation. Sounds of revulsion rippled through the crowd at the sight of the prince's thick, scaled skin and the ridge now growing along his spine. The king strode toward his son, and the prince prepared himself, fully expecting a backhanded blow, even though he had never been struck by his father before. Instead, his father embraced him and wept as he held him tightly. In shocked disbelief, the prince buried his face against his father's shoulders. "Do you wish to be freed from the dragon, my son?" The prince answered in despair, "I have wished it so many times, but there is no hope for me." "Not alone," said the king. "You cannot win against the serpent alone." "Father," sobbed the prince, "I am no longer your son. I am half beast." But his father replied, "My blood runs in your veins. My nobility has been stamped deep within your soul." With his face still hidden tearfully in his father's embrace, the prince heard the king instruct the crowd. "The dragon is crafty. Some have fallen victim to his wiles and some to his violence, but there will be mercy for all who wish to be freed. Who else among you has ridden the dragon?" The prince lifted his head to see someone emerge from the crowd. To his shocked amazement, he recognized an older brother, one who had been lauded throughout the kingdom for his onslaughts against the dragon in battle and for his many good deeds. Others came. Some came weeping, others hanging their heads in shame, and the king embraced them all. "This is our most powerful weapon against the dragon," he announced. "Truth. No more hidden flights. Alone, we cannot resist him, but together, we can win." Church, I just want to encourage you that if you are struggling with something, if you have something in your life that you keep returning to, there is a way out, but it requires a tribe. Get involved, get connected, get plugged in, join a small group, surround yourself with people because we want to see you succeed. We want to see you beat the demons that you struggle with. We love you, we care for you, and we're praying for you.